It's important that I start this meeting on time in the sake of military precision. Some say that's an oxymoron, like military intelligence, but we'll have our speakers speak to that. Welcome. My name is Frank Wright, President of the Historical Society. I think this is a new record this evening. Thank you for all coming. I know you're all here to hear me speak, but I'm going to keep my comments brief and let Larry have some time. This is the last lecture in this series, this season's series, the Betty Intagliata lecture series, and Betty's here with us today. And you're welcome here tonight without charge, thanks to the benefactor, Bill Charvey, who gave money to fund this series. So thank you, Bill. Bill's here too. Thank you. Thanks, Bill. And without further ado, I'll have Betty introduce our speaker.
Okay. It's really quite a pleasure for me to be introducing Larry Humes, because it was a long time ago when one of the KMI reunions came to Venice, and that's when I first met Larry. Larry has held many titles during his 4-decade-long career, but the one he says seems most appropriate is storyteller. Since retiring to Venice a decade ago, he has worked to preserve Venice's history. He writes about this history in our local newspaper, the Venice Gondolier. He also has a book. The title is City by the Gulf, Venice, Florida, its first 100 years. It will be published this fall by the History Press. So we gotta all make sure we buy that book. Now, Larry is a 1965 graduate of KMI, and I'm sure there's probably other graduates in this audience. Of course, they didn't let girls in, except maybe for a dance or the back door if nobody knew. But without much more ado, I would like Larry to come up and start the program. Thanks, Larry.
Thank you, Betty. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight. Really appreciate you showing up. Thank you to Betty and Intagliata and to the Venice Area Historical Society for putting these lectures on. It's wonderful to have this available to us to tell us our history. So we want to thank them for doing that. There are a couple of people that I want to introduce tonight, special guests that have shown up. Bill Baldwin, class of 61. Stand up, Bill. KMI, class of 61. Jim Flora, class of 1962. Bill Victor, where are you, Bill? Yeah, right next to us. Class of 69. Are there any others? I haven't seen any of other brothers here tonight. I think that's it. We do have another special guest. We have a honorary alum of KMI, Patrick Keir. Pat, stand up. Take a bow. Patrick and I, back in 2014, worked with the late Nancy Dietert in renaming the North Bridge onto the island in honor of KMI. And so we appreciate his help. And thanks to Bill, from my colleague up here in the uniform. We thank you for that. There we go. So KMI was founded in 1845. It was, until it closed in 1971, it was the oldest military preparatory school in the country. During its 126-year history, more than 11,000 boys graduated from KMI. And Betty, I'm sorry to correct you, but there was one woman graduate. I'll talk about her in a second. You may recognize, I don't think that'll probably work, but went too fast. You may recognize the buildings in the background. No, we're going the wrong way. There we go. That's the San Marco building. You may recognize that. Next to it is the Hotel Venice. Those were the primary buildings on our campus. And then this area here where the cadets are standing, where the formation is, that's Centennial Park today, but that was our parade ground. During our tenure, a lot of our alums, they fought on the many battlefields: Antietam, Chickamauga, Bull Run, Gettysburg. They charged up San Juan Hill with Teddy Roosevelt. And we served in just about every war, from Civil War through, including Vietnam. But we also, our alumni, distinguished themselves in other ways. In politics, in sports. This is Danny Sullivan, class of '69. We called him Spin and Win. I think it was in '73. He spun out, hit the wall, came back to win the Annapolis 500 and beat out Mario Andretti and a few others. They've distinguished themselves in politics and medicine, just about every discipline you can imagine. And also entertainment. Victor Mature, class of 1932. One of his classmates, Jim Backus, Mr. Magoo, and the television funny man, Fred Willard, who graduated in 1952. All started with this gentleman. His name was Colonel Robert T. Allen. He was born in Baltimore in 1813. He attended West Point, graduated 5th in his class, went on to serve his country in the Seminole War. He eventually took off the uniform and he taught physics and mathematics at Transylvania College in Lexington, Kentucky. He established KMI, or the Kentucky Military Institute, on this campus, which was about 6 miles outside of the state capital, Frankfort. In 1847, the school was chartered by the state of Kentucky as a military preparation school for those boys who were going to go in the military. And back in those days, this was before the National Guard, so a lot of states, particularly in the South, had their own state militias to help with disasters or whatever the state needed, they helped with. The schools like KMI, helped prepare the boys for military service, taught them strategies of war and so forth and so on. You probably recognize this gentleman. This is William Tecumseh Sherman. Before the Civil War and his famous March to the Sea, he wanted to start a military school much like KMI. There weren't a lot then, and so he came to KMI, the campus, and he spent several weeks studying the operation of a school like ours, and how did you do it? How did you perform it? After he gained as much knowledge as he felt he needed, he went on to Louisiana, and he founded the Louisiana State Seminary of Learning and Military Academy in 1860. 2 years later, he resigned as superintendent of the school because the Louisiana had seceded from the Union. But the school did continue, and it continued to do well. It does well today. You would know it today as Louisiana State University. The school continued to operate through the Civil War, but there were reportedly a lot of fistfights in the mess hall between those cadets who supported the Union forces and those who supported the Johnny Rebs. But it continued to do well. During the Civil War, 7 graduates of KMI served as generals in the war, 5 for the Union and 2 for the Confederacy. Now, before you raise your hand, this isn't them. I don't have a picture of them, just to show you what looked like a general there. But they did serve, as did many, many of our alumni in various roles throughout that war. One aspect of Sherman's march through Georgia was that his aide-de-camp would ride out ahead of the forces, the military forces, and he would visit plantation homes on the way to the Atlantic Ocean, and in an effort to find a suitable plantation home that would serve as General Sherman's headquarters. And if he found one, that was great. And if he didn't, it was burned to the ground. Now, the captain on one occasion, supposedly, reportedly, called on a home, knocked on the door, and was greeted by the woman of the house. She invited him in for tea. They sat in the parlor, and as they talked, he gazed around and over across the mantel, and he noticed on the one edge of the mantel a picture of a young man. And he said, "Madam, who is that young man?" And she said, "Why, that's my son." He said, "Madam, that was my roommate at KMI." They didn't pick that house for Sherman's headquarters, nor did it burn. In 1862, Congress passed the Morrill Act, and one of the pieces of that legislature was that they established the Army's Reserve Officer Training Corps, or as we know it, ROTC. And several aspects of that, but much like KMI, its purpose was to prepare young men for service in uniform. Now, a couple of things I'd point out. We conduct on the right-hand side. We conducted military exercises. We practiced war. We learned all the strategies that went into it, and those were part of our classes. We attended military courses throughout our tenure there. The picture, though, on the left-hand side, that would be our rifle team. And correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think that rifle range was actually located in our gymnasium here in Venice, what today is Venice Theater. It's not there anymore, so rest assured if you go to see a performance. After the Civil War, a lot of the curriculum, not only at KMI, but for a lot of military schools, and they were starting to develop in other places, Greenbrier Military School in West Virginia and Culver and Indiana and other schools. They started to shift their curriculum, less focus on military training and more on professional occupations. By this time, Colonel Allen had left KMI. He was involved in other activities. His son, Robert Dickinson Allen, served as commandant of the school. And by the way, part of that charter that we got from the state of Kentucky stipulated that all of our diplomas had to be given to us by the governor of Kentucky or his designate. which I thought was kind of interesting as well. The school closed in 1887, but it opened a year later. And kind of an interesting, I forgot to mention an interesting trivia about Colonel Allen. He married a woman named Julia Bond. Julia was the niece of President Andrew Jackson. And they met at a function, a reception, if you will, at the White House. Colonel Allen actually ended his life in a tragic way. It was July 9th, 1888. He was visiting his son who lived up near Kissimmee. He was out fishing on a fish boat. He lost his balance, fell overboard, and got tangled up in the trout lines he was dragging behind the boat, and he drowned. And he's buried today in Greenland Cemetery up near Kissimmee. This gentleman is Colonel Charles Fowler. He graduated from KMI in 1878. He was quite a disciplinarian. No messing around with this guy. You broke the rules, you went home. Very simple. He purchased KMI in 1894, and he merged KMI with an academy, the Sterling Academy. The school was located in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. And that school had 7 women students. And so the Sterling Academy and the KMI joined forces, and we ended up with 7 cadets. And Minnie Dewerson did graduate from KMI. She didn't wear a uniform, but she took classes, I understand, and did very well. I don't know what she did in life, but anyway, she distinguished herself as a graduate of KMI. In 1896, Colonel Fowler purchased and moved his school, Kentucky Military Institute, to a former plantation on the outskirts of Louisville in a little town called Linden. It was the old Ormsby plantation. He purchased, I believe he purchased 100 acres. I know when we went to school there it was 100 acres. The plantation probably, when he lived there, he was a hero in the Spanish-American War, did very well. I suspect, and Colonel Hodgen suspect, that plantation probably existed all the way to the Ohio River. But by the time the school was located there, it was about 100 cadets. On the left-hand side, my pointer isn't really working. Anyway, on the left-hand side, you'll see the white building. That was the Ormsby plantation. And by the way, the cemetery was right on the edge of the campus. So we would go over and pay homage to Colonel Ormsby and his family. Anyway, by early 20th century, Colonel Fowler was having some physical problems. And so he went and he visited his doctor, and the doctor said, you know what, you got to get out of this climate. You got to get down where it's warmer if you want to feel better. And Colonel Fowler said, well, I can't do that. I got a school to run. And he said, well, take the school with you. So he did. And he searched around and he found property in O'Galley, Florida. It's on the east coast of the state, close to what we would know today as Melbourne. He established a winter campus there. This would have been, on the left, an advertisement for the Kentucky Military Institute and Florida Winter Naval Academy. I love this. If you look at the picture, there's a couple of rowboats and a couple of day sailors. That ain't much of a Navy, I don't think. But in any event, it must have impressed them enough to help build the enrollment. The picture on the right, I don't know what they're doing. It looks like all these gentlemen in their parade clothes are saluting a palm tree. I don't know what that's about. I guess it was for marketing purposes, I guess. Anyway, it was great. The cadets, I should say, did very well. It was easy to learn in the sunshine, in the warm weather. And outside the classroom, there were a lot of extracurricular activities. They could go fishing. They could go hunting. You can see a little bit of both there in front of them. I love the alligator that was nice enough to pose for this picture. But anyway, Eau Gallie was popular, and it was popular with the students and with their parents. Excuse me. Normally, they would come down after the Christmas holiday, and they would go back a little before Easter time, and they would go back to the Kentucky campus. And they did throughout the remainder of the school's operation. School did very well until 1921, and they had a major fire on the Eau Gallie campus. A lot of the buildings over there were burned. Also, some of the buildings on our Linden campus were destroyed as well. The school ended up closing in 1924, but it was opened the following year. It was purchased by a gentleman, Colonel Charles B. Richmond. Colonel Richmond was an instructor at Greenbrier Military Academy or School in Greenbrier, West Virginia. He and 3 other Greenbrier instructors came, bought the school, and operated it. I might point out the picture on the right was the entrance to our Linden campus. It was a beautiful entrance. Those were our stone gates. And you would drive like a typical plantation. You would drive back, I don't know, not maybe a quarter of a mile, but a long way with these oak trees on either side of the road. It was just a beautiful way to enter the campus. And it was a beautiful campus, I might add. Thank you, sir. Tenure under Colonel Richmond were considered the golden years of KMI. There's a gentleman standing there on the steps of Ormsby Hall blowing a bugle. I don't know why. There's a student attempting to blow up the chemistry lab, it looks like. Excuse me. In the lower left corner is a nice picture of the Linden campus. You can see, again, the Ormsby plantation in the upper left-hand corner. The barracks, A and B barracks, were surrounding, and the little glass house in the center of the campus was the guard shack, and we had an officer, we had a faculty member who was on duty for that day. We had a student cadet officer on duty, a non-commissioned officer. There we went. And so forth. But this was the operations center of the campus through the day. Bear with me, we have a technical difficulty here. I guess my ears aren't big enough. There we go. That was the nerve center of the campus. That freshman year, these are some of my classmates, and we're marching in fatigues. We had drill practice, I think, most every afternoon, and it looks like we're off marching, so I'm probably somewhere in the back hiding in my fatigues. I don't know. The other picture I found interesting because cadets are lined up. The battalion is lined up there on the tarmac, and there are some people watching. So I'm assuming this was our graduation exercise. It was much like if you picture West Point, in my opinion. My colleagues may disagree, but the sergeant major would dismiss us, and we would throw our hats, our garrison caps in the air, because we were done with this place. We were out of here. We were going on to bigger and better things. But then it sunk in. Most of these guys we'd never see again. And exhilaration suddenly turned to hugging and tears, because these weren't just classmates. These were our brothers. We lived together for 4 years. And it was a very emotional scene. At least it was for me. In 1924, a gentleman in Sarasota named Ray Richardson, he had graduated from KMI in 1906, and he was actually served as commandant of the school in 1909 and 1910. He wrote a letter to Colonel Richmond and said, "Hey, Colonel, if you ever think about going back to Venice, or coming back to Florida for a winter campus, we got a really nice place down here in Venice that would be ideal for the school. Well, Colonel Richmond was very interested. We talked to his nephew, I think it was, at one of our reunions recently, and Colonel Richmond loved to play golf, and he wasn't getting to play much golf in the wintertime. So that was an incentive, too. So late in the spring of 1932, he came to Venice. A lot like right there. That's Venice Avenue. You've probably not heard that name before. He was had come here with a BLE, but he stayed on and sold real estate. If you needed your power turned on, he was the guy to see. He took care of everything. Anyway, they met with Bud. Bud would say later that when Colonel Richmond arrived, there were 3 cars on Venice Avenue, and one of them was fixing to leave. These were hard times for Venice. Our population in 1928 was about 3,000 people. Census figures in 1930, 309. We couldn't even keep the street lights on at night. We had no money. It was broke. But Colonel Richmond didn't care. He saw stars in his eyes. He looked at the buildings, the San Marco in the background there. He looked at the Hotel Venice, and he said, you know, this would be ideal for my winter campus. The first floor of San Marco would be ideal for our classrooms, and the students, the cadets, could live on the second and third floor. And then in the Hotel Venice, we could put even more students, some of the younger students, and would also house some of our administrators and our faculty. We're 3 blocks from the beach. We've got sunshine and fresh vegetables. And right in front of the school, we have a perfect parade ground. He thought this was great. And so, in July of 1932, he made the decision to lease these 2 buildings. The Sarasota Herald Tribune announced on July 1st of 1932 in their edition, headline, banner headline, KMI coming to Venice. It was great. They said it's a new era of prosperity. That's what they said. Bud Wimmer said, it's like a shot of adrenaline to a man with a heart condition. And the paper went on to say that at that very moment, as they were reading this in their newspaper, Colonel Richmond was in Cleveland, Ohio, at the offices of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers, signing the lease to close the deal. The first cadets arrived at their new winter campus on January 5th, 1933. The train arrived about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And by the way, I thought it'd be interesting to say the annual tuition was $950 a year. And that included your food and the free train ride down from Kentucky. It was not a pleasant ride, trust me. That's probably what the locomotive would have looked like. And we all came down together on the train. They called it the KMI Special. That first train consisted of 5 sleepers and 1 baggage car. There were 175 cadets on that train, averaged about 16 years of age. There also were 25 faculty and administrators there to make sure they kept the peace, and also about 25 staff members. They all came down on the same train. And we continued that tradition until the school closed. We all came to Florida together. We came down right after the Christmas holidays, just like Colonel Fowler did. And we would stay until just before Easter time, usually. On that first day, there were an estimated, according to the Herald Tribune, there were an estimated 1,500 people there to meet us at the train station. Now keep in mind, there were only 300 residents. Where'd they come from? Sarasota, Fort Myers. This was a big deal, a big deal. They couldn't have been more elated. We cadets were always glad to meet with the high school girls who came to meet us at the train station as well. Created a little bit of friction between us and the high school boys. Any high school boys here? From Venice? No? No. Good. I'm safe tonight. Nonetheless, it was wonderful to be greeted. Herald Tribune said it was the largest gathering reception they knew of in the history of Sarasota County, which was great. And in those days, they lined us up and marched us to the winter campus with the cars and the people walking along, looked like a military parade. I don't know about you guys, but by the time I got there, we just waddled across the way. There was no bridge there, no intercoastal waterway. It might have been for you, Bill. No. Anyway, we wasted no time. Classes were held the very first day after they arrived. The first full dress parade was held on January 15th, so they gave us about a week to shine our shoes and polish our brass buttons and prepare for it. Unlike this picture, this would have been shot around 1935. The first parade was held on Tampa Avenue because our parade ground, if you will, Centennial Park today, had not been quite completed yet. So we had our gathering on Tampa Avenue. And by the way, you'll see pictures of our mess hall. We would assemble on Tampa Avenue. We had special police that blocked off the street, and then we would march into the dining hall. Except I think on Mondays, our day off. I think we could kind of waddle in at our own speed. But anyway, that's kind of what it looked like. Notice the Kentucky Military Institute across the top of the San Marco building there. I'm going to refer back to that in a minute. Well, I'll tell you what it is now. Julia Cousins Lanning. How many of you remember Julia? Knew Julia? Yeah. Well, her older brother Jimmy went to KMI. Their father, Mitt Cousins, was actually our property manager for the school year-round. He watched it and took care of it. And Jimmy was enrolled in the school. Mitt said he couldn't afford the tuition. He couldn't afford to pay for Jimmy to go to school. And Colonel Richmond said, well, can you afford to buy him a uniform? And he said, well, yeah, I can do that. And he said, he's in. Well, Jimmy he hung over the roof and painted that Kentucky Military Institute on the roof. And his mother, Carmen, was scared to death he was going to fall and break his neck. Julia told me that story, so that was kind of fun. You'll see him again in a minute. So we leased the buildings for 9 years. And then in 1939, the school was doing so well, by the way. Within the first 4 years of the Venice, Florida campus, they increased their enrollment by 100 cadets. It was a lot in those days, considering it was still the after effects of the Depression, but they did it, and they increased their enrollment. He bought the 2 hotels, and he also bought the old Orange Blossom Garage. That is what the theater is today. That building, we had our gymnasium in there. We played basketball. We had Vesper services in there. On the left side of the building, down the side, those were our military science classes. We had an armory. Each one of us was issued an M1 rifle, or earlier than that, probably would have been an Enfield rifle. I don't know. But we had to clean those darn things every week, and you got pretty good at it. You could pretty much do it in the dark. Anyway, we kept all of our rifles in that building. And of course, as I pointed out earlier, we had a rifle range in there. They were 22s. You could almost perforate the target. You weren't going to put a hole in the wall. And then Mitt Cousins, our property manager, did have an office in the back of the building, and that's where he operated, kind of a shop, machine shop back there. And that would be behind where the stage is today for the Venice Theater. This is what our classrooms would have looked like. We had classes were ranged in number probably from 10 to 15 per class. This would have been where in the grand hallway of the San Marco today. And we had all different kinds of classes. I remember one story, Bunny Pace was our football coach. He also, I've told Bill this and a few others, but he also taught science class, and we had him right after lunch. You couldn't do this today. And he spoke in a monotone, and he went on, and we all drifted off. He very quietly, he was also the track coach, and he had a starter pistol. He kept it in the drawer. Now, if you've been in the San Marco, you know the acoustics in there are horrible. He very quietly, without saying a word, just kept talking in his monotone, took out that starter pistol, bang! And everybody went up in the air. Chairs went over, and everything was a mess. And he never said a word. He just put the gun back in the drawer and kept right on teaching. This was our cafeteria, which is in the Hotel Venice. It looks very much the same today. We all ate our meals together. Some of the students, like Jim Cousins, helped fund their tuition by doing jobs, working in the kitchen or delivering the food to the tables and so forth. So it was indeed a time of prosperity for Venice, because not only did we come and the school came, but our parents came with us. And I don't know about the rest here, but my parents discovered Venice, and they fell in love with it like I fell in love with it. And they kept wintering here. So people ask, how long have we lived here? Well, that depends. You know, we started coming here in 1962. My parents did, at least, and this was always home. We always came back to Venice. Oh, went too fast. No, I didn't catch that. This is our daily schedule. Our classes were announced with bugle calls. So where you might have been in a class where they rang a bell or something, we had bugles. So you would wake up at 6:30 in the morning to reveille. You would go to bed at night to taps, and you would have different bugle calls during the day. And you knew very, very well what that bugle call was in order to do what you needed to do or where you needed to go. We used to have a lawyer here. He passed away a couple of years ago, Dan Boone. And when Dan and his wife moved to Venice around 1957, I believe, they rented an apartment on Venice Avenue above one of the shops. And they arrived at night, and the next morning at 6:30, they woke to the sound of a bugle. Both shot straight up in bed. And he was talking to somebody, and he said, "What in the hell was that all about?" And he said, "Oh, that's KMI. We all get up at 6:30. They blow the reveille, and we get up with them. We have no choice." Anyway, that's kind of our schedule. Our day, when we were in Venice, our day off was Monday, which separated us from the local boys, high school boys, kept us kind of apart. At least that was the effort. We, various classes. We had drills. We had exercise in the afternoon. We did a number of things. And also we had sports down here, just like any high school. We played basketball and baseball and swimming and golf and you name it. That was always fun. And we competed against local high schools. The picture on the right is kind of interesting. If you look carefully, you'll see that that's a military exercise. We're playing war. And in the background, you can see the palm trees. That would have been shot in Venice. And it would have probably been, here we go again. It probably would have been, I don't have big enough ears, I'm sorry. It probably would have been over behind the train station where there's a park now, little city park. Well, that was all scrub at that time, and that was a great place for us to practice our military strategies. And we would have non-commissioned, we had officers and regular officers and non-commissioned officers stationed with KMI that were teaching our courses and instructing us on military activity. By the way, and I'm kind of freewheeling here, but early on, maybe 100 years ago, if you graduated and attended KMI for 4 years, you could go into the Army automatically as a captain. If you were here 3 years, you'd go in as a lieutenant. By the time I graduated in 65, I think I would have gone in as a corporal. I didn't go in the Army. I chose the Air Force instead. Anyway, that would have been shot, and we would have been practicing our military activities over in that area. It was just very convenient. There is a picture on the left. That's Julia Cousins. She would have been about age 12 there. That's her father, Mitt, on her left. And Mitt went on to serve as mayor of Venice at one point. Wonderful guy. And on her right is her older brother, Jimmy. Jimmy graduated, as I said, in 1935. He went on to become a pilot for Eastern Airlines. He learned to fly at the old Albee Airport here in Venice and became a pilot with Eastern Airlines. We held full dress parades every Sunday afternoon. We hated those. I hated them. Did you hate them? I hated them. I mean, we had to get dressed up. It was hot. We had to spit shine shoes. It was just horrible. And I remember, and there would be thousands of people, hundreds and thousands of people along Venice Avenue, sitting in little lawn chairs watching us parade. And I used to look at them and think, don't those old people have anything better to do? And now I'm one of them. Where are they when I need them? But nonetheless, it was very popular. It was a real marketing draw for Venice to bring people from Sarasota and Tampa and Fort Myers to come on a Sunday afternoon, because there were no entertainment here, really. There was a movie theater. That was about it. But that was entertainment. It was a wonderful thing, and it was a great draw. We had a great relationship with the city of Venice. KMI did. Colonel Richmond did, certainly. We used to say, Colonel Richmond makes the money. Character makes the man. Colonel Richmond makes the money. But we did. We had a good relationship. Alex Hodgen was our last commandant. He told me in the late 40s they wanted a stoplight in Venice. They didn't have one. They wanted it at the corner of Venice Avenue and 41. And the Florida Department of Transportation said, well, you don't have enough traffic to justify, you know what's coming, right? So Smitty, who was our mayor, called Colonel Richmond and said, I need a favor. I need your battalion to march around the intersection about 5 times, all 350 of them. And we got to get those numbers up. Hey, we got a traffic light. It worked. But we had a great relationship with the city. And we cadets did. We really felt like the people of Venice really liked us, appreciated us. And I think they did. I hope they did. In addition to classroom activities, of course, remember that in Kentucky, we were out in the country. I think there was a pig farm next to our campus, wasn't there?
Horse farm on one side and a dairy farm on the other, and pigs somewhere.
Pick your livestock. I mean, we were in the middle of nowhere. Here we were in the middle of town. It was wonderful, wonderful. Upper right-hand corner, there used to be a drugstore where C.J. Carney's is today. Dick and Meadows drugs, Rexall Drug, you probably remember that. They had a fountain in there, a little soda fountain, and the boys were smart enough to hire beautiful high school girls to come and make the milkshakes. And so right after Soupy, which was our dinner meal, we'd all run over to Rexall Drugs to ogle at the girls, and that was wonderful. The guy pictured there is Bob Briner. Bob used to operate the Dairy Queen, which was located at the foot of the KMI Bridge, or pretty close to it. Wonderful guy. If you were running a little low on your allowance, you were good. He'd cover you. You had credit. If it was a slow night, he might even invite you back, let you make your own Sunday. Ran that Dairy Queen for a long, long time. Wonderful guy. And of course, we had the beach. We could not have cars, could not ride in cars except for your family, with your family, but we could own boats. And some of the cadets had their own fishing boats. You also could fly in airplanes. And one of these gentlemen, Bill Baldwin, had a classmate that had his pilot's license, and we had was that off the old Albee field, or was that the old Army field?
The airport.
Oh, the airport field, okay. So they would go down, they'd get maybe $100 between all of them, and they'd rent a plane and fly to Miami for the day. Wasn't against the rules, nothing against it. What a great opportunity. But a lot of things we do on the water. And of course, we had the beach. And in those days, there was nothing on the beach. None of the high rises, they hadn't been built yet. It was just beautiful. And it was just a wonderful place to relax and enjoy. And we used to have, I skipped it, but we used to have dances in formal, not formal, but yeah, I guess, dances in the courtyard of the Hotel Venice. And high school girls from Sarasota and Fort Myers would receive an invitation, a formal invitation in the mail. You are cordially invited to attend a KMI ball with all these guys in uniforms. And that was a big deal. And so they'd bring them up and down from by bus. And we had a jazz band that would play, and it was just a beautiful place to have parties and get-togethers. And then by the late 1960s, the war in Vietnam was heating up, and there was a lot of anti-war sentiment. ROTC buildings on college campuses were being burned. You remember this. And it trickled down to military schools as well. It wasn't so much the parents that were against sending their kids here, as it was the kids just didn't want to be associated with ROTC or anything to do with military at all. And so enrollment at KMI dwindled at a lot of the high school, military high school, and we were a military high school, basically secondary school. A lot of them had the same problem. And so our last winter here in Venice was in 1970. And the following year, in 1971, that was our last class. The school closed permanently in 1971. A lot of other schools did as well. Greenbrier Military School. Other schools, regional, closed. And military schools kind of were regional. Again, they were started as preparatory for the state militias, but then it kind of continued on. And so, but a lot of those schools were forced to close their doors as well. We still are around, a few of us. We're starting to eyeball that bottle of cognac. We're getting a little gray up here. But we're still around. As I said, Patrick and I work with Nancy Diedert and got the bridge renamed, KMI Bridge. In 2014, excuse me, the Public Broadcasting System produced a documentary on KMI, and that's marketing material there for it in the lower left. And it ran on PBS stations really all over the country. The documentary premiered here at the Venice Theater and also at the Brown Theater in Louisville, Kentucky. We still get together every 2 years. Our reunion this year will be in Louisville, and then we alternate. Our next reunion here in Venice will be in 2026, which will coincide with our centennial celebration. So it's a wonderful timing. And I was talking to the mayor, and he said, well, it'd be great. We could have, maybe you guys could march in it. And I said, no. We'll ride in a car. A few of us may make it with walkers, but our marching days are over. Our theme, or not our theme, our motto at Kentucky Military Institute was character makes the man. When I was 14 years old, I thought this was about the stupidest thing I'd ever heard in my life. It made no sense to me at all. But now that I'm an old man, I look back and I think they were absolutely right. Character absolutely makes the man. You know, there's an old saying that I forget what the oldest saying. No, I don't know. There's an old saying that reputation is what other men know you by. Character is what God knows you by. And I think that's true. And I think we're kind of missing that these days, lack of character. But for us, you can talk to any of these guys. Yeah, I've interviewed graduates from the 40s, 50s. It's true. When we took any exam, at the bottom, at the back, you would write and sign your name. I neither received nor gave any information on taking of this test. And the faculty members would walk out of the room. They wouldn't even watch it. And if you committed a cardinal sin, whatever that happened to be, and you were caught, we had a student council. The faculty didn't throw you out. Your fellow students did. And they determined, you're not really KMI material. So we lived up to that. And I think we still do. I do. It was KMI was a turning point in my life. It really set the path for where I was to go. And I am so blessed that I had the opportunity to be part of the Corps. I really enjoyed it. If you'd like more information about KMI, they have a wonderful display in the Triangle Inn. Also, the KMI Alumni Association, we worked with the San Marco HOA to develop a exhibit on the grand hallway of the San Marco building. It's really great. We have a video running over there and a lot of things. So if you want to learn more, I would suggest that. Also, the train depot, they have some information down at the train depot on KMI. So I would welcome you to continue to learn about it. And with that, I think we'll entertain a few questions if you have. And after the program, if you'd like to talk to any of my brothers down here, I know they'd be glad to answer your questions.
Lady in the balcony.
Okay, one thing I was going to point out on the last slide, I had my email address, but it's easy to remember. It's 1926 Venice @gmail.com. I'm sorry, the question, yes. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, well, I remember KMI.
Good for you.
But anyways, when I was 12 years old, I lived in Venice, where Willie Nokomis, and I went to Nokomis Elementary School. And when you're a 12-year-old girl, you're enthralled with, 14, 15-year-old, 16-year-old girls. And I can remember the girls in Venice they had their purses, and they had lots of hearts, like KMI John, KMI, Larry, or KMI.
Larry, there you go.
Had the most, if I remember. But anyways, that's what I remember. It was, and I remember my grandparents taking me to, to the park to see everything, and so it's a little bit of a different world.
Yeah.
But anyways, that's all I have to say.
Thank you for sharing that. Thanks. Ron Smith.
I just wondered who's pictured here.
The 60s were not good to me. Was a question? Yes, ma'am. We had garrison caps, but we wore little cloth caps. I guess they call them Glengarry caps. And when we went to particularly to the rec hall, we'd put them in our hip pocket. And the high school boys, their trick would go behind us, grab that cap, and run out the door. And I was talking about KMI at one point, and the guy said, "I got your cap." I knew exactly what he was talking about. But yeah. Yes. Yes, sir.
How did KMI recruit their students? I mean, how do they find them? And then, what was the type of person that they were recruiting? What would have been an ideal case?
My wife tells people that I went to reform school, so that'll give you an idea. They did advertisements in like Boys Life and a lot of the periodicals of that time that would have appealed to young boys. A lot of it was legacy. Brothers went there, fathers and sons. So it kind of trickled down. One thing I might add, a lot of people say, well, were you required to go in the military? No, we weren't. Not a lot, but many of us did not go in the military. I did because it was during the Vietnam War. I was facing draft, and so I figured, why not? I wasn't afraid of the military because I'd grown up in it for all that time. So it was a very comfortable environment for me. So a lot of us did serve. I didn't make a career of it, but I did my time. So, and another question I've gotten a lot is, were there any African American students accepted to the school? I've heard that many times. Before he passed away, I asked Colonel Allen, the last commandant of the school, I posed that question to him, and he said that to his knowledge, no black student had ever applied to come to KMI. There was one time they thought a student might be African American, but he turned out he was from South America, and so he wasn't. We did get a lot of students from South America, by the way, Brazil and other South American countries. The parents felt like it would be a great entree into the United States, and so it was a great step into becoming an American citizen, they felt. So, yes, sir.
What was the age range of the boys attending the school, and what was the cost to the 60s to attend?
Good question. So there were times when they ran kind of a junior high school. They had kids there 7th, 8th grade. But what they determined was that was just too young for boys to be sent away in that kind of environment. So primarily it was 9th through 12th grade.
And cost?
Cost, I tell people it was about what it would cost to go to a college, about a tuition of a college. There was a question over here somewhere.
Hey, well, actually, first, thank you.
Sure.
Presentation. You sort of answered my question. I was wondering if the school tracked graduates and whether they went on to the military academies or KMI or the Citadel, any kind of data on that.
Well, Jim Flora here from class of 62, he manages our website. So everybody who went to KMI, that's kind of our hub. That's where we keep in touch. We find out who's passed away or, who's doing what. And so we use that. We broadcast our reunions and so forth. So beyond that, I don't think there's really anything that tracks military school. They've really fallen out of favor. Culver Military Academy in Indiana is still in business. They have their own cavalry. It's a very pricey school, but it's very good. And they still seem to flourish. But beyond that, and Admiral Farragut, which I don't even think is military anymore. I think it's just a prep school. A lot of them became prep schools. So, yes, sir. Yes, you.
Quick observation. Number one, you have a military school in Sarasota.
Yes.
I played sports with some of the faculty, nice people.
Mhm.
Number two, we're from St. Paul, Minnesota. We had two military high schools. One switched to co-ed and went to the non-military. The other, St. Thomas Academy, doing well.
Good.
The school that dropped the military, though went ROTC, they had their biggest class in 10 or 15 years recently.
Great.
So,
Good.
And I'm not pushing any war agenda.
No. Yeah, Bill.
Larry, we have a Hargrave Military Academy in Virginia.
Okay.
Still doing well.
Wonderful. I think I'd be delighted if more of them were around. Yes, ma'am.
How large was your graduating class? And at KMI's height, how large was the student population?
That varied. My class was about 350. Was that about right? They were different classes. Mine actually was the best class. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had to research Larry's record before this evening, and I've learned that he has been absent without leave from the Venice Area Historical Society for so long that he's been dropped from the rolls. That's DFR for you.
Over the wall.
Over the wall. But I've got the authority to bring him back in. So I'm going to give him a 1-year membership. And you'll get a renewal letter in the next year. We lost a purse. This was found out in the lobby. I haven't looked inside. Nobody wants it? All right. Any other business? I'd like to thank Bill Habither for putting up this display of the cadet uniform, and he's got everything right on there, right? I think so. All right.
60 years, I know.
Thank you very much.
Can I tell you my favorite joke?